think with deloads, the main goal is, again, reducing fatigue and revealing adaptation. So you might have heard the phrase, you don't grow in the gym, you grow outside. That applies on a day-to-day level, but also applies on a week-to-week level, and even a month-to-month level, as well. So you can kind of zoom out those things. So with the deload, which is usually a weekly measure of reducing training, again, you can undulate throughout the week and do like a harder day and an easier day. That's like really deload midweek, for example. You can have big progression phases. You can have more maintenance chillax phase. That's a deload on a monthly level, Post 4-year mesocycle after your Olympics, you can just take a freaking year off. That is, again, deloading. But again, like, it's usually just to make sure, okay, we can reveal everything we've had from before, particularly with like hypertrophy training and like those kind of trainings, because it's an investment for the future versus a revealing of the now. And then just to make sure you're good for next week and the weeks after and all those things. So I think with like rotating stimulus, like I mentioned, you'll be like, with, using different metrics of different systems to gauge recovery, it can kind of tell you how you're along. So you might notice if you're doing neural system, you might use certain measures, but your muscular system might be a little bit, fatigued, but not quite like needing a deload. It's not that fatigued. You could notice that, like, okay, you're halfway in contractions and performance in that sense, but neurological size cooked. I mean, you can do the custom weight. You just got to be really good at programming. Like, it's nothing against him, but I think how some people might hear this is, oh, I can keep going hard, let's go do something different. I think that's just my one little worry with that.
So that wasn't the approach I took it from. I kind of took it from the level of say, for example, let's just say, for example, the goal is hypertrophy, right? And you kind of use a metabolic stimulus to deload. When I use that stimulus, you use it for a purpose, right? The purpose for being, I'm just not conditioned well, so I might need to go through, a phase like that where, I think like his metabolic phases, I think, is, specifically targeting, systemic fatigue. So you're not taking muscle groups to, basically local failure. You're kind of just exhausting your cardiovascular system, enhancing that effect, which can then potentiate the growth through a hypertrophy phase. So that's kind of like the angle I took it from. Now another one I think I've seen him use is, when you take a deload from hypertrophy and you use more of I can't remember what it's called, but it's kind of, you use a deload phase maybe for 1 to 3 weeks to kind of improve, a bit more nutrient partitioning. So, let's just say you're not so good at taking in carbohydrates, right? For whatever this person, whatever their reasons may be, using a deload I sometimes think can last longer than a week, right? But kind of using that phase to improve, carbohydrate tolerance, right? To then, to shuttle it into your system better, to then when you go back into, your main phase, right, to improve things going from there. That's kind of like the angle I was, taking it from, just like learning it from, which I thought was quite interesting. But I think you're right. Like, I think a lot of people do, they'll look at that and be like, oh, fuck, I can just continuously go hard. But which came back to my main point before of there are times where, you just need a total deload altogether, and I think
one of
those
go on. Yeah. Well, I think one of the things is with training, you can buy certain systems. It's really hard to exclusively use certain systems. You go for a run, you're still using your muscular system. So I think with like rotating stimulus, the further away they are from each other, the less transfer they will be naturally. But you might notice if you're doing neural strength phase, you're still fatiguing the muscles. And even though you might be good to keep training, it's really about, okay, I plan to do a variation of mechanical tension, damage, metabolic, whatever you want to call it at the time for this particular stimulus. How long would I see a return on investment in my trainability, to use a custom term? Or like you're saying before, of not varying things, how long can I get a return on investment of that stimulus? That answer might be 5 weeks. Now the question is, well, what I'm doing with my deload thing, I'll probably be good next week, but will even that slight bit of not fully recovering, all that stuff from potentially non-training or whatever, how will that look? Not week 1, week 2, week 3, but week 4, week 5, or however long you figure, the return on investment is still good. Because if it's cock blocking that, then I think you kind of defeat the purpose. Because, does that make sense? And the nutrient partitioning, I think, is a good point as well. You know, I think when you're in a really sympathetic state, in particular, or you've got a bunch of inflammation, so things aren't actually going to cells. Chilling out is when we best uptake things. You know, it's not when you're chaotic and stuff like that. So, no, that's perfect, man. Yeah, it's good. But I think I just really want to mention that point of like, it's about the future.
Yeah.
And it's usually, and the differences manifest in the extremes. So the end of the cycle.
Mm-hmm.
So will that little bit of interference there, even though it's biased cardiovascular, will the muscular system, which would now about bias, will be affected in the trainable zone and be limited by recovery because it wasn't fully recovered over here? And maybe the answer is yes, maybe sometimes it's no, but that's like the criteria and the question I think that should be asked.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. Cool.
Thank you for watching the Forge podcast. If you enjoyed it, we'd love for you to subscribe. If you want to find out more about us, check the description. And as always,